Hello, Anne-Marie and Daniel. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Anne-Marie, can you hear us? But we can't hear you, Anne-Marie and Daniel. Can you hear us?
Sorry, you can't hear me?
Yeah, but it's not 3 new posts. So 2, that's why I did 2 new posts. And then this post, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to get the comments. I'm going to say change the spelling here, increase this, remove this.
Hello, Anne-Marie. Can you hear us?
Then you're going to resubmit it. So 3 total.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. It seems like your microphone has some issues, but
Yeah, I think it was because I had my headphones in.
can you make? Did you open the global class page as well? Because I can hear echo from your side. So, are you on our website, global class website?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Hello, Sima.
Okay. And also Dakota, I would say.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hey Sima, how are you?
And I would say, so you know,
Yeah, doing good. Sima, are you? Because I'm hearing
Some echo from far end. Do you see any other audio stream coming in?
No, we're the only one there. The person that you see.
Oh, okay.
so let's
Nobody has it open in Durham, right?
No, nobody has opened Durham. Yeah, I have closed all the our website where live streaming is going on. So I think we should be good.
No, there's nothing wrong here so far here. I don't see anything there.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Did you? Yeah. So, okay, yeah.
Sandeep, are you there?
Now you are.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, now you.
Hello, Anne-Marie, Josh, and Daniel.
I put the microphone here.
Hello. How are you? Hello. So the 3 of you don't know each other. And Josh, I'm wondering, just you got a light behind your head. Can you turn that off? Or will it be too dark? Aha. There, that makes it better a little bit.
He has to
Adjust the camera?
He's
Okay.
joined from the phone. So he has to
Oh, what's-
keep the phone. We
Okay.
are seeing a lot of wall and.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. So I think we just lost our sound though.
No, no.
No?
Hungary.
And Moose Jaw.
Nice. What did you think was up? What are you doing?
We are on.
Oh, we're in that? Yes.
What did you think was up north? You can.
Okay.
Yeah, I started with.
Right. So the students are just on a break, and they'll be back in about 6 minutes.
I mixed it up with yellow.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I got the mixed up.
Can you hear me?
How could you get them?
I'm not good at geography.
Did you learn geography?
I'm not good.
No? Oh, she's looking for sound.
Oh yeah.
Hello, Daniel. Can you hear us?
Yes, okay.
So, Anne Marie, can you hear us?
Yes? Okay, good. No, I can't. Can we hear her?
Yeah.
I didn't hear her. No, okay. No.
So, Anne Marie, it seems like you had.
Oh, there we go.
It seems like you have some issues with your headphone.
Yeah,
We're not able to hear you properly.
Okay, I'll leave them out.
Okay. And the connection seems to slip in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's bandwidth because her bandwidth is not. She adjoined from Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm wired in, so it should be.
But still, it seems like you're like. It seems like there is some fluctuation in bandwidth because we are not able to see you like flawlessly. Like, so do you see any freezing from our end, like in terms of audio and video?
Nope, everything's good.
Like the thing fell off.
I can barely hear Anne Marie. She's really quiet. So try to sit there.
Yeah. I wonder, can we adjust volume somehow, or it's just the connection?
It seems to me a connection.
Okay. Can you hear? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Anne Marie, can you check your volume levels on your computer if they are set at the full volume?
You broke when she said when you did it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was better, actually.
No, but still, it seems like your audio is coming from far. Because yesterday when we tested, it was pretty okay. So I'm not sure what has been changed.
What's that?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah. So Josh, can you confirm if you can hear us all right?
Sure, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. So Josh, can you adjust your phone a little bit because we are seeing a lot of ceiling rather than your face?
Oh, sorry about that. Does that work?
We're not able to see your face now.
We get you from here down.
Oh. What
There we
about now?
go. Excellent.
Yeah, that's much better.
Nice to see you, Josh. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So we've got 3 minutes. The students are just trickling back in. Can the three of you see each other?
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So this is the second time we've done this in class. This time, Anne-Marie, we brought in Langara College out of Vancouver.
cool.
So that was great.
Was it Leanne Johnson's class?
It was Effie Klein's class. Do you know Effie?
No.
I met her at
know
a
of her.
conference this summer. Okay. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, and so just a little bit of background. So Anne-Marie and I met in Vancouver working on a magazine together. And Josh was a student in our program, one of our most successful students, and got hired soon after graduating. And Josh, where did you work before the Moose Jaw Times?
I was up in Melfort.
Right. The Melfort Journal.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'll just ask you to talk about that a bit. And Daniel's joining us from Budapest, and he's going to give us some background on how journalism has changed there in the last couple of years, and also he's working in media and communications. With a focus on videography, I think, a bit, right, Daniel?
Well, it's more in the past. That's sort of where I started, and I've gone more into business now. Well, that's more current, but yeah, we will see where the conversation goes, and you know, if there's a complimentary, then we'll go with that.
Great. Okay. So I think everybody's here. And so we'll begin. All right. So, can I grab everyone's attention to the screens? So I'm going to stand up and turn my back over here. Hello. So at this point in time, your laptop lids can go down. Any note-taking that you're going to do, unless you have accommodations, I would like you to do it by hand, please. So these are definitely one of the skills that a journalist needs in the field, to be able to take really detailed notes and synthesize that information. So I introduced our guests earlier, but I would like to introduce you now face to face. Anne-Marie is coming in from Vancouver. Daniel is coming to Budapest in Hungary. These are our all right. So I don't want to talk too much, but what I would like to start off by doing is maybe, Anne-Marie, because you're in the top left corner, I'd like for you to start off by giving us a little bit of a day in the life. So tell us a bit about and what you do day to day.
Okay, sure. This is Geist. This is the magazine that I work on quarterly. I'm the associate publisher right now. As of next week, I'll be the publisher and editor-in-chief.
Congratulations.
So thank you. But what I do every day kind of varies. Usually the first thing I do is check in with my staff. We're a really small staff. We're only 3 people. And so I check in and kind of make a plan for the day. I've been doing this kind of work for about 15 years. So as Teresa mentioned earlier, I worked with her on a magazine called The Loop, where I was volunteering and sort of interning. And then I got my communications degree at SFU here in Vancouver, well, Burnaby technically, and focused on publishing. And I originally went into book publishing. I worked there for a number of years, worked in the States, doing cookbooks and nonfiction and art books. And then it's just sort of evolved from there, doing freelance editing and writing. And then I eventually got the job at Geist. So,
and are you still... Sorry, I'm going to ask a question. Are you still working with Edibles as the managing editor?
I am also the managing editor of Edible Vancouver. So I think out there the closest one to you guys would be Edible Toronto and Edible Ottawa. They both have Edible magazines. It's a controlled circulation magazine. They usually have anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 or 50,000 copies per issue, 6 times a year, most of them. So it's a pretty big undertaking. So between those two magazines, it's a pretty busy day for me because I work on both of them pretty much every day.
Okay, and just before we move on to Josh, can you just sort of detail just a little bit of that so the students have a bit of a background, especially in the differences, because you're doing a lot of different work than Josh is.
Yeah. So, for example, for Edible Vancouver, I strictly focus on producing the content for the magazine. So that involves hiring editors and writers, doing the actual editing of the pieces, and coming up with sort of a flat plan, a layout, a potential layout for the designer to work with so that we know what order the stories appear in, things like that, where the ads go, stuff like that. With Geist, my job is a little bit more comprehensive because we're a non-profit society. That's how our magazine is organized, and that's how many cultural magazines are organized in Canada. So that means I'm writing grants. It feels like every day, even though it's not every day. It's curating, selecting, editing content, assigning writers, looking for new writers, assigning photographers, looking for photographers all the time, and then all of the HR that comes with running that sort of business. It's basically like being an entrepreneur in that you're running an entire business.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. So before we open up to questions, I'll just give everybody a bit of context about what everyone's doing. And so Josh, can you describe sort of how you got where you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. Before Moose Jaw, like I said, I was in Melfort for just under 2 years. I was working at the Melfort Journal over there, which is a with the Melfort Journal, over there I was covering city council, community events, and just basically anything that goes on in town. And then after that, I want to go to I guess a bigger city, so I started opening in Moose Jaw and just applied there, and I've been there for a month now, working at a daily newspaper.
So you went from a weekly newspaper to a daily newspaper. Can
Yes.
you talk about the differences between what your day looked like at a weekly publication versus what your day looks like at a daily publication?
Sure. So at a weekly newspaper, we'll just have one story meeting, just discussing what we're going to be doing for that week, what's coming up, and I guess at a weekly we had more time to work on our stories and our features. Whereas at a daily environment, we have meetings every morning. For myself, I work on 2 stories a day, and I need at least 2 sources for each story with pictures. And we publish 5 days a week.
And do you publish on only in print, or are there multiple platforms that you publish across?
We publish in print, and we have our website online, which has the same stories that we post at the end of the day.
Okay. And Daniel, just from Budapest, can you tell us a bit about the media landscape in Budapest? Like what
Sure.
types of things are available there? Just because this is something, and then I'm going to open it up and students can ask, just so that we have a little bit of grounding.
Okay, sure. So I think it's best if I give just a little bit of background because there's always a bit of bias, especially when it comes to journalism. One of the things that I've actually discussed with Teresa was the fact that my father has been a journalist for close to 50 years now. So he has literally gone from the dark ages back here when, there was no electricity and, just big clubs to the 21st century where we actually have the internet now. He has been in everything from radio to television to print paper, where he has actually been at the print paper for about 15 years now, I think, maybe more, maybe less. And I myself have graduated from a media and communication studies program. So back to the question of how the media landscape looks like. It looks a little stale. It lacks a bit of color in the sense that when it comes to newer platforms, such as, blogs, everything that's on the internet, that's fairly similar to what's out there in more of the Western countries. I don't think there is a huge change in there. I mean, there is a difference in audience, but not in the way they operate. When it comes to traditional media platforms, radio, television, and actual papers, I think that's where it differs the most. Mostly due to the fact that in most of the Western world, in the United States, for example, or even in Britain, if you think about all the publishers, you usually know what political party a certain paper or television belongs to. I mean, I'm not from the United States, and even I know in which direction Fox News leans in, for example. So this is public. Well, for most parts.
I know, I believe, yes.
Whereas in Hungary and in some other European countries, it's a little more well, how shall I put this? It's a little more deceptive in more than one way, because you don't always know whether or not a source of news is actually biased toward a party, or if a media outlet is influenced by a political party. So I think that this is where the biggest amount of difference actually comes from, I suppose, when compared to either Canada or the United States.
Great. Okay, that's interesting, because you raised some issues that we didn't touch on when it comes to a literary publication, which is what Anne-Marie is writing. And how would you describe Edibles, Anne-Marie? So Geist is a literary and arts publication, would you say?
Yeah, describe Geist as literary arts and culture. And then Edible is more of a niche publication that's oriented, obviously, around food, as you might guess from Edible. So, but a much more broad general audience for than, say, for Geist.
Okay. And then when we're talking about the Moose Jaw Times Herald, well, how would you describe that media outlet, Josh?
I would say we're really community focused. We just try to, I guess, tackle the issues that people really cover, the stories that they're passionate about.
Right. Okay, so with that grounding, I'm going to open it up to the floor. We had a wonderful discussion, actually, before we connected with you about what it takes to be a journalist. So I'm just going to open it up to the floor. Are there any questions for Anne-Marie and Josh and Daniel?
No, I'd like to ask a question kind of for all three of them, but I will actually come over here so you can see me because otherwise over
there you are.
I really just want to know how you all, like, I know that Anne-Marie, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what kind of made you all decide that you wanted to go into this field, and how did you all start? Like, what was your first real journalist type of job?
Were you able to hear that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So Daniel, what made you want to go into media? You were the first person that said yes, so.
Oh yeah. Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I basically started my career, and okay, so this is going to not directly correlate to journalism, but I started my career as a professional gamer, essentially on the internet when I was about 15 or 16. Which was very exciting for me, because at the time I was 15 and I was already essentially working with people 10 years older than me, actual professionals. So I got a head start, one might say. And then I started working with an American company in 2011 or 2012, I think, that was basically creating educational, entertaining videos for gamers. They were basically hiring the top players from one specific game and creating content around them. So, at that point, I kind of I always had this idea of wanting to go to a interview.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just curious as to which game you were professionally playing.
Oh yeah, that
Just
was
to satisfy
World of
curiosity.
Warcraft back in the day.
Oh, so cool. Sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, that was an exciting time, but I always had this idea of wanting to go to a university, getting at least a bachelor's degree in something. So at that point, it came down to not what I want to do once I finish, but what I feel would benefit me the most. And I thought that communication and media studies in general would give me a solid foundation upon which I could build. And, even if I decide not to go into journalism, I could pivot to almost anything, which I actually did, because I've never officially worked as a journalist. I've written articles for which I got paid, but those were, far and few between. So nowadays I actually work as a communications consultant, and I work with international companies, and secondarily I work as a management consultant. These two things are actually very similar, but to cut a long story short, I think the most important thing in here is the conclusion that I've drawn, which is the fact that some of the skills that journalists have, some of the traits that very good communicators have in general, are traits that companies are willing to pay for. Basically, like, without limitations. But simultaneously, people who study journalism or communications or media, they aren't necessarily told of all the options that they have, which is it's very weird to me. Because honestly, someone who's a good communicator is usually a great problem solver. And that's something invaluable in the world of, well, not just business, but really in any field.
Fantastic. Thanks, Daniel. Who would like to go next? So, to reiterate the question, Jackie?
Yep. To reiterate the question, my question was what made all of you want to get into the fields that you're in, and what was your first sort of job that got you into journalism and that got you where you are today?
So what made you want to get into the field that you're in, and what was the first foot in the door? Josh, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So I guess for myself, I was just naturally curious about, I guess, what's going on around me. I guess I always want to know, issues people cared about and what was happening at City Hall. So I guess in high school, I knew I was always good at writing. I wasn't that good at math or that good at science, so I figured why not match my curiosity with writing, and I discovered journalism that way.
And what was the first foot in the door? What was the first sort of journalistic experience that you had?
Well, I guess my first real job in journalism was up in Melfort, but I know that in college, even I was kind of blogging with different websites and kind of freelancing there. But yeah, I would say for myself, it was definitely Melfort, being a reporter over there.
And I'm going to ask a leading question here. So
Sure.
I know that two other experiences at Durham College. I know you worked for our school newspaper, which was the Chronicle, and you were part of the class that also. Were you part of the class that started the Water Buffalo magazine?
I don't think I was. I think I worked on it the year after it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So also, what was that experiential learning like? So working for the Chronicle, pitching stories, writing and producing content for the Water Buffalo magazine. How did that translate into your experience at the Melfort Journal?
I think with the Chronicle, I guess I just learned a lot just to really just run around campus and I guess get more. I guess with the Chronicle, I just had it was funny with the Chronicle because I was covering more community events and campus events there, and I guess that led me to focus on more community-oriented stories. With the Water Buffalo, I know you put a real emphasis on making our long-form feature stories. I guess you made us really work on those long-form feature stories, and I guess for myself that really helped me here in Moose Jaw. In Moose Jaw, we do our feature stories every Wednesday, and that's where we put like 1,000, 2,000 words in a story. Because I know with the Water Buffalo, we will work on these stories for weeks on end. Especially, I remember there was a story that I did on a hockey player.
Yes.
And I guess some of the I guess discrimination or struggles he went through. With that, I had to do a lot of research on it. And even with my feature stories here, I work tremendously. I spent a lot of time on those features for the Times Herald here.
Great. Yeah. So what you're saying is that feature writing is different than those daily news stories that you're producing.
With the daily news stories, you can only write, I guess, as much as you can in a short amount of time. You can't put, I guess, explain in detail too much. You just got to get to the point quick and to the point fast. Because in a daily environment, you have deadlines every single day, and if you don't have anything in at that time, then you got to scramble for something because you got a paper to fill.
Yeah. Great. Emery's laughing. I think she understands. Do you want to jump in at that point, Emery? Yeah.
Well, I went to production last week and we sent our magazine to the press last week. So, and there were a couple of holes to fill. So
you had to scramble to fill those holes. Yeah.
Yeah. I got my start basically just by virtue of my personality, to be honest. Like Josh, I'm just naturally a really curious person, and I also have kept a journal since I was 10 years old, all of which I still have, despite my denial, vehement, that I'm not a pack rat. So I've always been a voracious reader, I've always been a journaler, and when I was a kid, I always wanted to find something that I could do that would allow me to indulge like all that curiosity, like Josh says. And it was hard to think of jobs that I could do that would allow me to just kind of like hang around and do whatever I wanted. And turns out being a writer and editor allows you to do that, which is absolutely amazing. So my very first job, the first time I ever got published was in the Loop magazine working with Teresa. That was my very first clip that I got. But
what was the story? Do you remember?
Oh, it had to do with a gift that we were sent to the office, and my keeping it in my backpack and going to school with it. I think it's an SFW.
Yes, we don't need to talk about that. I can tell them afterwards if you don't want to mention it now.
That's great. Because
yes, you will.
But
it's
anyway,
true.
I probably already am.
Yeah.
But since then, I've done freelance editing and freelance writing as well for the different edibles. I've written for Canadian Geographic. And what I really like about it is that as a freelancer, you can have your own schedule, you can work in your jammies with your dog. But the thing is that you still have to have discipline. And I think that's one of the sort of core competencies that you have to have as a writer or as a journalist. You have to be able to self-manage, and you have to be disciplined. And I find that really benefits me in my job at both magazines, because there's a very famous Douglas Adams quote that says, "I love the sound that deadlines make as they go whooshing past." And when you're working in all the time, they really do whoosh past. And if you don't have that discipline to complement your curiosity, you're going to be hooped and you're going to blow your deadline. And then you have holes to fill in a paper or in a magazine, which is not cool for your editor. So I would say like discipline is one of those things that I've always sort of had, but that I've also had to really cultivate over time so that it can work within my job.
Excellent. Lots of interesting things there. So I'm just going to open up. I have my back to everybody, but Catherine has a question over here.
Hi. I was wondering, this is a question to everybody, what was your most favorite story to research or to edit or to write about, or to report, something that's really funny or exciting?
So I'll let someone just jump in. What was the first thing that came to mind, the best story that you ever told to research, to write, to report? I'm seeing smiles on everyone's faces. I'm really intrigued.
I have two. One of them involves editing a childhood hero. I grew up in a really rural area, and so I used to listen to late night CBC radio all the time. And there was a radio host on CBC back in the 90s called David Wisdom. And it was because of David Wisdom that I got to find out about all this music that I probably never would have had access to otherwise. So it came time that the Geist, he was going to write an article, and I got to edit it, and I had an utter fangirl moment when I got to actually meet the guy and edit his work. The other one is I get to work with Evelyn Lau on a regular basis, and I don't know if you guys are into poetry or anything, but she's a pretty big deal in the poetry world, and I'm sort of her editor here now, and it's amazing to work with people who are that skilled with words in a very different way than what I normally do. So those are my two favorites.
Daniel or Josh?
Sure, I'll go.
All right.
All right. So I guess for myself, there's two stories that come to mind. I guess one story was in Melfort, where I was talking to the marketing director for the local hockey team there. She was singing in Telemerica, which is an annual charity here in Saskatchewan for the Kinsmen and Canettes. And I guess the story was that even though she has a full-time job of being a marketing director, she was also a very fantastic singer, and nobody really knew about it. she never really told her friends that she could sing. So it was just kind of, for me, it was kind of just interesting just talking to her and her just talking about why she's so passionate in singing, why she's so passionate in performing. And yeah, I love those. I love those. I guess personal interest stories or human interest stories where people just, they could just explore their hobbies and interests. And in Moose Jaw here, I did a story on this one young little girl. She's 5 or 6 years old, and she was able to explore agriculture and just explore different opportunities and careers there. I think I have it here actually. Yeah, I have it right here. It's this story on I guess in the story she got to ride a combine, she got to ride a tractor, and just go out on the fields and harvest crops and lentils and things like that. So it was kind of interesting just seeing that, you know, seeing that the new generation is really interested in farming.
That's great. Daniel?
Yeah, I'm not really a journalist, so the stories that I've told are my favorite, are far and few between. Hence why I was hesitant to speak up before the 2 actual journalists.
Well, I'll just say to you, one of the things that I am saying to the students is that as storytellers, we work across lots of platforms, and not everybody is trained as a journalist. But I think your input is of interest, yeah.
One thing came to my mind, which is probably the most unprofessional thing I've done in a very long time, was actually when I was still back in high school. And there was a high school newspaper, and at one point they approached me and they wanted me to write a couple of articles. And, you know, I was happy to do it because I always liked writing. I sort of believed that I was good at it. Whether I was or not, you know, that's another question. But one of the things that I got to write about was actually about my aunt's, my father's sister's husband, he was a guy named Paul Smith, and he used to be a Hollywood actor, actually. So he was a very intriguing, interesting man. I was 15 when I first met him, and I met him in Israel, actually, because that's where he moved with his wife after their house actually got flooded in Florida at some point. And you know, just to have been able to talk to him when I was 15, that was quite the experience, because the guy, I mean, most of you are actually, I think, are probably too young to have seen most of his movies, but you know, if some of you are into movies and movie history, then things like Midnight Express, Dune, David Lynch's Dune, the traditional Popeye movie with Robin Williams, these will probably ring a bell. And he was in all of these movies. If you've seen Popeye, I think that's probably the most likely to have actually been seen. He played the part of Bluto, you know, opposite the late Robin Williams. And to have heard stories about all of those things, he has also worked with Schwarzenegger back when he was an action star. So, you know, to hear all those stories and then, you know, years later, and ask him about a couple of specific things, and then write about it, that was just really a culmination of many, many amazing things. So that you know, that's a memory that I think I'll always hold dear.
Fantastic. Great answers. Any other questions? Corey?
I was sort of thinking, was there ever like a piece of work, whether it was like an article or just something you wrote for fun, that you just look back on and just realized how far you've progressed?
So is there a piece of work that when you look back on it, you can see how far you've progressed?
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely. Yeah, some of the earlier articles that I wrote, when I look at them now, I'm really proud of myself, because as I continue to read and write, I find myself much better able to convey the ideas in a way that's reader friendly, and specifically I'm really proud of the way I've been able to adapt my tone to different publications. This is a really key thing in journalism and in writing and in editing, is that that you're writing to a specific audience. It's not just for fun for yourself. You're writing for someone, and each publication will have a different kind of audience. And when you discover that you're able to write to these specific audiences, it's a pretty amazing feeling.
That's a key point, adapting tone to your audience. Josh, did you have an idea?
I don't really have any specific idea in mind, but I know that if I look back at my earlier work in Melfort, it was just, the quality wasn't there. It was kind of, my work wasn't as strong as I know it could have been. But I know that just you know, after 2 years there, when I was talking to my previous editor, he told me that I came a long way and that you know, my quality was just a lot better. And even with my new editor here, they're saying how you know, my work is just only getting better here on out.
So you raise an interesting point. So Anne-Marie works as an editor, and you work with editors. I'm just going to sort of segue a bit here to talk about that relationship, because it is so important, the relationship between the writer and the editor. So Josh, for you, how have your editors helped you improve over time? And then Anne-Marie, for you, how as an editor have you helped your writers improve? So Josh, how does an editor help you improve your writing?
I think for myself, they kind of point out, I guess, common errors or common mistakes that I keep making. It's just, I guess, showing me where I could go with my story, just pointing me in different directions of where I could go with it. I know from my editors, I try to have an open, honest, I guess, relationship with them. And if I have any problems, I can always go to them. And they always give me constructive feedback. They know that they're not attacking me personally. They only want me to get better and be a better writer. And yeah, you just got to be open to their feedback.
Anne-Marie?
My primary goal as an editor always is to do my best to assist the author in getting the message across that they really want to get across. A lot of times as a writer we get really excited by the words we get used, and so my role as an editor is that I have to make sure that the words that are used are the best for the reader. And to do that I have to have a really diplomatic relationship with my writer, and as Josh says, like an open and honest and trustful relationship between the writer and the editor. So a lot of times when I'm working with newer writers, they tend to take things very personally, but really, if you keep in mind that the role of the editor is to help you get across what you want to get across, then things usually go pretty smoothly.
So you cut out a little bit, but I think what you said was when you're working with newer writers, they feel that what you're saying they take personally, that it's a personal attack in some ways?
That can happen for sure, but if one keeps in mind that what I'm trying to do is help you get what you want to get across to the reader, then everything works out fine.
Right. Do you want to add anything to that conversation, Daniel?
Yeah, questions? I think one might say that the relationship that you guys described is not unlike one between a teacher and a pupil in many ways. But more than that, I think I wanted to ask your students a couple of questions. Most important of which I think is I'd be thrilled if you guys could just tell me why you are studying anything related to journalism or communication.
Great question.
Hi, Ellen.
Yeah. So should we start? All right. So Cam.
Hi, I'm Cameron.
Hey.
I chose to study journalism because I was always curious, and whenever I was with my friends, I'd always tell the stories that I knew from my father, who's a firefighter up here in Pickering. And whenever I was telling those stories, they get really intrigued, and then I would be curious about learning more about what would happen. And my dad would always just come home with these great stories, and so would my mom. And I would just love telling these stories back to people. And what got me into journalism was actually my cousin. He told me about this group up in Toronto that I really wanted to know. I forget their name. But then when I told my friends about it, they're like, oh yeah, you were actually like really good at writing and you're good at storytelling. So like to be a journalist, you need to actually like, tell stories, and that's one of your best qualities. And when I asked my teacher about what I could do for it, she told me that just writing would always help me. So that's why I just chose to study journalism.
Fantastic.
Okay, sorry, before all of you tell your stories, just one thing. Please also add whether or not you actually want to become a journalist or whether you want to work in another field.
Great differentiation. Daniel, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I was actually kind of similar to Anne-Marie. Before all of this, I'm actually a little bit older than some of the students here. I'm 24, so I have actually did college before. I dropped out because I took real estate, and I realized very quickly I hated it. It was terrible. No offense to real estate agents, but it was so mind-numbingly not what I wanted to do. But I was trying to be practical. But I was a lot like Cameron. I always loved to write. I was always curious. My favorite shows growing up were always murder mysteries, documentaries, anything that was trying to find the truth. Things that were just more intriguing to me than, you know, The Bachelorette. I don't know what people watch these days, to be honest. But journalism was something where I wanted to be able to not necessarily just work for myself, but I wanted to be able to do something where I didn't want to feel like I was working, I was doing something that I actually really love to do. And as for which field I want to get into, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be a traditional journalist, but because I like to talk and all of that kind of stuff, so I don't know if I would rather be like a reporter. I'm not 100% sure where I would go, but I want to possibly go into more of the either investigation or the reporting side of it.
Okay. Megan?
I'm Megan. I haven't always loved writing. It came in the years of high school. I've always loved reading, though, and I want to be an editor. That's what I want to do. And I don't know, like, what field, like, where I want to go with that. I don't know if I want to be, what Anne-Marie does. I really like poetry. I really like like novels, all that. So, thinking leading towards that way, but I was actually going to go into law here at Durham College, and then it got to the deadline, and I decided that I hated law. And I was, like, terrified because I didn't know what to do, but, like, my writer's craft teacher, first semester of high school, told me that I should go into editing, so, like, I saw on the careers thing of the journalism program that you could get into editing and publishing, and last-ditch effort, I needed one more course to throw in, and I was like, just throw journalism in there. And then I ended up switching into it, which I'm really glad I did.
Fantastic. So Victor over here.
Hi, I'm Victor. I got into this program in sort of a kind of a convoluted way, in the similar kind of to Teresa, actually. I already have a degree of English literature from Queen's University, and I'm finishing up a degree in linguistics. And journalism, I sort of wound up here in chance. I initially applied for paralegal and was accepted, but I paid my tuition so late I was waitlisted. So I went to them and I said, can you switch me to journalism because it's still open? And they said, sure. And so here I am. I feel like this is a way for me to really improve on the skills that I learned in university, a way to sort of improve my communication skills, and especially across different types of media and that kind of thing. And in even just starting the program, it's already got me thinking about what I want to do afterwards, because I had this whole neat and tidy little plan laid out for when I finished my paralegal certificate. But journalism has sort of thrown a monkey wrench into that plan completely. So now I'm thinking I would like to be like a movie critic or a media analyst, like a freelancer of that kind. So.
If I could just jump in for a second. I just wanted to say that I find it really interesting that you guys are all coming from somewhere else to journalism, or thinking really broad about what you can do with journalism. I think what Daniel mentioned earlier about a good communicator means you're a good problem solver. I think that what you're all saying kind of speaks to that as well. If you think creatively, you can do a lot more than just work for a newspaper or just be a reporter. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, because those things are amazing. But being a good communicator and a journalist offers you a lot of different opportunities to work in a lot of different fields, and so you don't have to feel that you have to negate one interest in favor of another.
Like
Yeah,
points.
I actually wanted to follow up with just one very simple question, and then I have an idea for a little bit of an exercise that would allow all of you to sort of do something together, including Anne-Marie and Josh, if you're game for that. But the question I wanted to ask after hearing all your answers is, if you think about what you've just said in a more pragmatic way, do you guys think that you'll actually be able to make a decent living off of your journalistic hopes and dreams? I know this is a really good question, and I'm not making any new friends. I apologize. I'm also very far away from you guys, so I'm probably safe.
You are fairly far away, it's true. Yeah. Okay, so Corey, do you want to answer? And then, so I don't know how much time we have because I only booked Josh and Anne-Marie until about 3 o'clock. But maybe we can get a couple of other answers, and then Daniel, can you lead us through your activity?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so Corey?
Okay, I'm trying to get on camera.
Yeah.
So I've kind of always enjoyed writing, like pretty much quite a few other people. And one of my teachers actually mentioned that I would do good in journalism. And I was thinking, so I might go for either news reporter or maybe an editor. And what one of my counselors actually mentioned was they thought that I would probably do good if I did reviews and that sort of thing. So I thought, so maybe I'd also go into maybe writing review columns or something like that.
Okay. Anybody else want to throw in a couple of things before we do Daniel's exercise?
I wanted to answer this question about making money with your job. For me personally, and maybe I don't speak for everybody, even if I don't make a whole lot of money doing what I do, I don't care. Like I said, I went into something that I hated. I have worked so many jobs just to make money in my life that even if I don't make a ton of money with my journalistic prowess, it wouldn't matter to me because it's something that I want to do so badly that I would rather be broke and happy than have money want to pull my hair out every single day.
I'm hearing a couple of yes around the room. Catherine, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How I wanted to get into journalism. I've always been interested in communications, and my family has always told me to communicate a lot and to get into that. And I speak a few other languages too, and I just really love writing and reading. I've always loved that. And I've also been curious in the weather ever since I can remember, and I would think it would be really fun to be a weather broadcaster, and that was my initial goal into coming here on TV. But ever since I've really broadened my perspective, I've thought about just being on TV as a regular news anchor. I'm really into broadcast, so that's why I'm here.
Okay. Anyone else?
No.
All right, Daniel, can you lead us through your exercise?
Yeah, sure. Canadians are sickeningly optimistic, by the way. You guys should spend a couple months over in this part of the world. That would be an educational experience. But anyway, yeah, so you guys are sitting in the global classroom and you're part of a global class now. And one of the things that journalists and people in general have to be really good at, especially in journalism, is pitching a story, pitching an idea. So how about Anne-Marie and Josh plays devil's advocate and tries to pitch a story about why the global class is entirely useless and bad for the students. It's a waste of time. And the students in Durham, you guys are going to pitch the opposite of that. The global class is amazing and people should take part in it. Whether or not you believe in it is another question, right? But just convince me one way or another.
Okay, so you're saying that we need to have a position, right? So you're taking a position on one side and you need to back it up with reasons as to why that position is true.
It's less about... I don't want to make it sound like a debate club, right?
Okay.
So when you pitch a story as a journalist, you pitch a headline, you pitch an audience, whether or not there is going to be proper engagement once you write that story, especially if it's on the internet. So tell me why your story about whether you're for global class or against the global class, why your story is going to reach with the story, what your headline is, what's going to catch everybody off guard and just make them want to read what you've come up with. It's your brainchild. Just go wild with it.
Okay.
This is one for
All right,
Josh, because he's the newspaper guy.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Emery's like, I work on long deadlines here. There's long leads on magazines. All right. So, do people have a couple of ideas? So I'll just, as people are thinking, I'll just say we had our professional advisory committee meeting last night where we bring people in from industry. So we have broadcasters, we have people in the magazine industry, radio, also newspapers, magazines. And one of the biggest things feedback that we get at every PAC meeting is how important pitching is. And we also, before we came in, watched a video that was produced by Kyle Christie from CP20. And the title, the headline is What It Takes to Be a Journalist These Days. And he talked to the people who run Mic Check, Vice Magazine, and CP24 about what it takes to be a journalist. And one of the key takeaways there was the ability to pitch stories. With that in mind, any pitches? Victor.
My headline, Global Class or Global Pass? And I'm aiming to reach, fellow college students with this article. It'll be lightly humorous, poking fun at the global class with as much love and admiration as is possible. And then the end conclusion would be, take it or don't take it. Pass or class, it's up to you. I would leave it open to the readers to decide.
Interesting, all right.
I think you're on the right track with the headline, except as an editor, I'd have to say, because of the ambiguity of the word pass, your article could draw people in or could maybe not draw them in.
Good editorial feedback.
What's the one trait of the global class that you're trying to latch on to? Like that's like, what's the what's at the core of the content? Because that's where I'm unclear. Like, okay, I got the fact that you got like 20 seconds to pitch me this, but what's the one thing that you think you could use to convince people to talk about the global class?
Well, the crux of the global class seems to be access to people you wouldn't normally have access to, such as what's happening right now. Honestly, I can't think of a way to spin it to make people less interested in the class, because this is just really cool. So I may have to rejigger my headline and figure out a new pitch for you.
Do we want to put Josh on the spot and ask him to be the advocate here and tell us why the global class is bad? And that's probably going to give you a couple of ideas as to how go for it.
Yes. You ready, Josh?
Do it, Josh.
Not really.
You have people rooting for you over here.
Go, Josh.
Yeah.
I think I'll take a pass on that.
On the class.
I mean, in all fairness, I think newspapers are less of a visual medium. Like, there aren't like 40 people staring at you expecting an answer. That helps.
Yes, true enough. Are you used to that, Daniel, having 40 people staring at you expecting an answer?
I mean, I've worked with startups in Hungary, and I work with international companies, so to pitch an idea and expect money in return is one of the things I do professionally. So I've always been very comfortable, speaking in front of large crowds, but now I literally have to. I either, it's one of those fight or flight moments where if I'm bad at my job, then nobody's going to want to hire me. So I need to figure it out on the spot how I'm going to, reach out to all those, rich investors, or how I'm going to convince a huge company to invest in a much smaller startup. So it's something you get used to. It's something you get gradually better at.
I think one of the key elements here, too, is how important innovation is to the journalism industry right now. And when we're talking about it's broad, right? Today we're talking about technology platforms. I introduced the idea of media outlets and operations. And so, you know, it used to be that newspapers were the way that we got our information, but those platforms have diversified over time and created the monitoring difficult for the industry. So in our program, we do talk about innovation and entrepreneurialism, and that idea of pitching is key. And so I'll just let the other students know, in the second year of the program, we do something with Fast Start. So Fast Start is part of the, it's like an innovation hub that's embedded in the college. And their job is to take business ideas for startups, Daniel, and actually give money towards that. So the second year's yesterday went into Fast Start to go through an ideation process to look at problems plaguing the journalism industry and solutions for those that could be implemented into our college newspaper, the Chronicle, across all platforms, our online, our print product, as well as our social media channels. So I think that discussion is really valid, that idea of thinking innovatively, right, and working on the spot to pitch an idea quickly.
Yeah.
And Victor, thank you for engaging in that. That was great. You're the only brave soul. Yeah. So we've come up to about 3:05. Just in closing, is there any closing questions just before we let these busy people get back to their lives?
Can I came up with a pitch. Can
Yeah.
I make a pitch?
Yeah, Megan's got a pitch. All right.
I've never had to make a pitch in my life, so here goes the first try. If I had to write a story about the global classroom and what I think it's good for and like why do I think it's productive, I'd take it from the angle of making connections. So journalism, I've been taught by Teresa and Danielle and Dan and everybody that journalism is about making connections, being able to call up that person as a source, being able to call up that person as a lead, getting a quote, getting information. I feel like the global classroom does that really well, because although you may be in Moose Jaw, you may be in BC, you may be in Hungary, hopefully like this is a connection that I've now made with the three of you. So like I can take from that conversation like 2 years ago and be like, oh, Anne-Marie would know that, and then like, yeah. That's the angle I would take that from. I don't have a headline because I do that last.
That's right. Anne-Marie liked that. She got the good.
You know what? I'll take a crack at it too, just because everyone seems so shy. I think I'm one of the few not so shy people here, as you can tell, because it seems just stealing hungry today. But my headline would be: Global Classroom broadens the student's perspective. And the reason why I say that is just from talking with all three of you today. First of all, otherwise we would never have this opportunity. We would never be able to talk to like an actual former professional gamer, someone who works for like an arts and cultures magazine otherwise. And for me, like my story would take the angle of how else would we ever have this opportunity, and how else would we ever really know that from a journalistic perspective you can take it to so many different like career paths, whether you work for a newspaper or a magazine, whether you work in communications. Like the global classroom has pretty much taught me that journalism isn't just like a pen and paper and you write a story on something that 100 other people have reported on already. It's really a very creative and innovative thing that's continuing to become more innovative over time.
Great.
Ta-da!
Good work. That's great.
Yeah.
Yes. So I am conscious of time, and I know you are working for a daily, Josh, so that means you have deadlines. So Marie, I know you just put one magazine to bed. That means the next magazine is starting to roll out. And Daniel, I didn't even check, but can you tell us what time it is in Hungary right now?
It's 9 p.m.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much to all three of you for joining us. Really appreciate it. And can we give them a good round of applause? Yeah. Thank you so much, and thanks to Sandeep. I don't know if you got to meet Sandeep in person. I'm going to put him on the screen. Can you? Oh, he's not even going to do it. All right, so there he goes. Thanks to Sandeep for setting us all up. Okay, have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much.
By the way, sorry, just.
Oh wait, Daniel's got something.
Just a minute. You know, I swear, because someone's got to advocate for global. Just if I can just pitch an idea. One of the things that I actually met Lon, the director of the Global Class, last Friday. He was in Hungary, and one of the things that we've actually discussed was putting up articles using the Global Class network. So to literally just spread different ideas, different researches, whatever. That comes out of global clusters across the Global Class network, which is literally 32 different countries now, over 60 universities, NGOs, companies, and whatnot. And we've actually struggled a fair amount in the past to get student engagement because students are fairly busy. It's very hard to convince people to do anything for free anyhow. But now that I actually had the opportunity to talk to journalism students, perhaps some of you would be interested in trying yourselves out at writing a couple of articles. There are no very strict guidelines as to what you should be writing about. There is basically no limitation. If you have a great idea, there is literally a platform that's at your disposal to get your ideas across to 30 different countries, to 60 different universities. So, something to think about.
So Daniel sent this to me before class started. So after we close off, I will show that to the students, and I'll let you know how many go up, okay?
Cool.
All right, great. Thank you guys so much. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.